Hey everybody, this is John with Refocus Your Photography Business and John Glaser Photography. And I'm thrilled today to have dog photographer Adam Goldberg on the podcast today. Adam and I have known each other for a little bit of time now, and he is located in Tampa, Florida, and he's an incredible dog photographer. So if you're a dog photographer, this podcast is definitely for you. Or if you're interested in getting into dog photography, this is definitely something you should be checking out. Not only does he do amazing dog photography work, he's also a master of the book project, and he has taught me a lot about like when it comes to doing book projects and stuff, and kind of given me some pointers and stuff along the way, and working with local dog shelters. I'm real excited to have Adam here to share what he's up to and what he's doing with his dog photography. Adam, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to give you one minor correction. I We photograph all different types of pets, not just dogs. So
Oh,
cats,
okay. I'm
rabbits,
sorry.
guinea pigs. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all good.
Yeah, I like a good correction because on your website you have all these different. You've got. I think I saw an iguana and cats and all that
Yep,
stuff. But
yep.
no, you do a lot of dogs. That's why I know you more than anything, and so I see a lot of that. But no, thank you for correcting me on that. And so, yes, definitely a good thing to know. So I wanted to first start off. You have a really cool story on how you got into like your pet photography and all that. Tell us a little bit about how you got into pet photography.
Yeah, yeah. So I originally got started with pet photography back in 2013. I actually worked at an animal shelter and I was hired to do the marketing, didn't know anything about photography, really didn't have an interest in it. And I was hired to redo the website. The shelter got burned by an advertising agency, and they rather hire someone internally to kind of fix what the ad agency did on their website. So it took about 6 months for me to get the website up and going, and really marketing is what has gotten me here today, but we'll, get to that. But the website looked great, and the photos of the pets looked terrible.
Mm.
So the volunteers were doing it. They didn't really know what they were doing. No one was giving them any sort of feedback on the quality other than it was awful. So they said, "Hey, can you or excuse me, can you teach yourself photography now that the website's done?" Because I was also managing the social media for the shelter too. And this was at the time, shelters were not really having standalone social media employees. It was usually like an add-on to someone else's job.
Mhm.
So this was in 2013. I was the first like social media hire that the shelter had to manage it anyway. So took about 6 months for me to learn and practice on all these shelter animals. And I had so many subjects to work with. So I would watch these videos online. I would go downstairs and practice. And I hated being outside with these shelter pets for a few reasons. In Florida, and you're in Texas, it's just so dang hot.
You can only shoot like eight
And
months out of the year. The other 4 months you're dying.
yeah, yeah. So it was too hot to be outside, but then also the play yard had so many smells from all the other dogs, doing their business. It was just so distracting and I was sweating terribly. So I was like, I gotta learn studio photography. So I practiced and practiced and practiced and got pretty good. Then I started training volunteers and I fell in love with pit bulls,
Mm.
specifically doing this because at the time, Miami, which is the neighboring county to where the shelter was that I was working for in Broward County, pit bulls were banned. So we were getting all these pit bulls in because the county south of us was banning them. And they were just amazing. Like I didn't know anything about them other than what I heard about them on the internet and the news. And I was like, they don't deserve this negative reputation. So I was working really hard to showcase these pit bulls that we had so many of up in a way that showed their personality. And I got really good at working with animals in a way to show their personality. And that's translated to my work today. But I just fell in love with using photography to do good and help these animals get adopted. So I worked there for 2 years. I was engaged to someone else at the time. And when you work at an animal shelter, you don't make a lot of money. So I wasn't able to support myself on my shelter salary. So I ended up moving here to Tampa, where I took a job as a director of marketing at a software company, like doubled my salary. You'd think I'd be the happiest clam in the world, but I just didn't love working for somebody else, I learned. So started volunteering at the shelter here in Tampa just for fun to get some extra fulfillment on the weekends and would share those photos online just for fun. Never thought of it as a business idea. And people started, hey, Adam, can you take photos of my dog? I see your adoption photos, but I'd love to surprise my girlfriend with, photos of my girlfriend's dog or whatever. Charging 50 bucks, just for fun. And it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And here I am. There's a little more to the story, but I want to be sensitive to time. But
No, no,
that's
that's great.
pretty
And I
much the,
love
the shortest version.
yeah, no, and I love the aspect of the pit bull side of things because I'm with you, as a pet photographer, specifically dogs for me. We get that kind of sentimentality about pit bulls a lot, and I don't know if you probably get this too. Like we'll get potential clients asking, "Will you photograph pit bulls?" Because they don't think
Hmm.
that most people will. And I'm with you. Like they're like some of the best dogs. They're fun. They're super super sweet. They're like the ones that I think I get more nuzzles of the head into my lap from them than anything else. Like scratch my ears, type of thing. So you're totally right. And I love that that was part of the story for this is that you really wanted to photograph them because you're right. I mean, I think any dog can be a bad dog if you train it to be a bad dog, but pit bulls get the brunt of it because I think more people train them to be that way, but the majority of them are not like that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Another part of the story I like to tell, and I can make it quick, but essentially, this was 10 years ago, so 25, and friends of mine knew I worked at the shelter. I was spending all my time trying to get these pit bulls adopted, but they drove to, I think, Atlanta or maybe a suburb of Atlanta, maybe rural part of town to buy a border collie puppy. And I was like, "You're driving how long to buy this dog when this shelter that I work at is 10 minutes away and I'm spending so much time." I didn't say this to them. I'm not very confrontational, but
no, you're
it
good.
was
You're good.
like it really pulled my, it just got bubbled. What's the word I'm looking for? Boiled my bubbles or boiled me up. I don't know
I
what
get it. I get
what
it.
terminology I'm trying to and I just didn't know how to confront them. So I just said maybe the pictures will or convince people to adopt and not drive to Atlanta to adopt a puppy. So that was
No,
that was a little bit of a detour, but that's part of the story too.
no, that's good. That's good. So I know like you and I have talked over the years, and one of the things that like started our conversations is I know you were really successful with book projects and everything. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things you're doing in your business, but I really want to focus on the book project side. I mean, and to me, your superpower at the time when you and I first met was the book project thing, and you were a wizard at it, and you were great at it, and you had multiple books and all that stuff. And I bought some of your books. They're sitting in my studio, and I share them with other people. I tell them it's your stuff; it's not mine, but I share them with other people because I like collecting books of other photographers. So, what got you into doing the book project thing in the first place?
Yeah, it first came out of a need. So when I say we, it's my wife Mary and I. Pre the studio, we've been here for 4 years now, but from 2016 to 2020, we were a shoot and burn photographer. We were doing 10-minute appointments, 150 bucks, and we were doing that all over the country. We raised $250,000 for 50 different animal charities doing that.
Wow.
Loved it. It was a lot of work. Not
Especially when you're
sustainable long
traveling all
term.
over the country.
Yeah. In our busiest month of 2019, busy month ever, rather, it came in 2019. We had 300 clients in November of 2019, which is like insane. But you think about 150 bucks times 300 in a month, that's a lot of money. And you're not selling any artwork yet.
Yeah.
So, but then you have 300 clients to edit and interface with. And it was just, anyway. So the pandemic came in March of 2020. We were booked through October of that year, doing these shoots all over the country, and we had to cancel everything. We refunded about $100,000. It was a little crazy. And okay, so then August 2020 comes, and we decided to open a studio, which we did. And people were like chomping at the bit for us to, and they were excited for us. So we had a lot of interest in our studio work. Then the holidays came, super busy, but then January came, and you probably know where I'm going.
Uh-huh.
Then March or February came, and then March came, and we had no bookings, zero. And I was like, Mary, what did we just do? We put our house up for collateral
Right.
for to rent the space. It was more than our mortgage for our house. And I was like, did we just make a big mistake? So then I was like, what are we going to do? How do we generate leads? So then I looked into a book project, and I took a few courses. I didn't create this myself, but that's what started us doing a book project is we needed to generate leads outside of us just opening in the holidays and people's dogs getting sick or pets getting sick. So that's why we started it.
I mean, and look at where it has become now. I mean, it's like comes out of need, but then it's turned into a big part of your business and everything. So if somebody was wanting to get into book projects and stuff like that, what is the first thing that you would recommend, or what is some advice that you could give somebody that's wanting to start and get going with doing a book project?
Yeah, so to quickly summarize, the book project we did is, and I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to summarize what our book project
Right,
is.
right, right.
So we called it Tales of Gratitude, a collection of thank you notes from people to their pets. Now, there's other book projects out there that train you to do like Dogs of Dallas or Dogs of Houston or Dogs of Tampa, and you take them out to different locations and photograph them in those cities. And I'm a studio photographer now. I don't want to be outside. It's too hot. So I was like, what can I do differently? And I watched a lot of Jimmy Fallon. I still do. And he does a thank you note every Friday.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I got the idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if you could write a thank you note to your pet and
Right.
read it to them during the session? So that was the theme of the book, where people who were accepted into it wrote a thank you note to their pet. Um, so the the advice that I would give to someone is it's a lot of work. If you think like, okay, I'll create a book and it'll generate some leads for me and then I'll have like a business card, but it'll be this book and I can sell it to people and make a lot of money. And the money, I think the biggest piece of advice or the biggest misconception is you're not selling like thousands of books and you're not going to be like this New York Times best-selling
You're
um,
selling it to the people that are in the book for the
photographer,
most
author.
part.
Exactly. Yeah, you're selling it to people in the book, and then because of the way we priced it, it was $150 a book. If you're not in the book, you're not gonna buy. You're not really gonna buy it. Most photography books are like 30, 40, $50, and then people get them as gifts for other people usually. Um, but the way we priced it was we broke even on the book itself because of how many we bought, the cost to produce it, and then the amount of time we spent making it. So really the money comes from, if you're doing it the way we did it, it comes from the artwork sales. So selling, doing in-person sales, selling artwork to the people that are in it.
Right. Right. So, I mean, I know like I've done book projects. You showed me, like I did one before I met with you, and it is a lot of work. It does generate leads, and a lot of people want to be a part of a cause. And so that's the kind of the lead gen for it and everything. But there are some drawbacks to it. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced there's people that want to be a part of the cause but don't care to buy anything. There's people that just want to be in the book because they think it's cool to be in a book and all that stuff. How do you converse with folks that are like these are their motives, and how do you draw that balance between bringing people in that's their motive versus the ultimate goal? In some ways, yes, it's to help a charity and help some kind of organization, but it's also to generate people that will come in and purchase your product at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. So that is going to happen. You are going to get people or attract people that just want to be part of the cause. And, if you're a photographer listening to this and you're doing it because you need to generate leads and this is your only way of making a revenue, it's going to be stressful when you get somebody in that thinks that you think they're going to purchase and make a, large purchase with you and then they don't, which has happened. We have had a few no sales every year from it, and it's stressful. It's like I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's stressful when someone doesn't buy something when you think that they will. As someone whose business, the business pays for our whole livelihood, my wife and I, and we have a son. So the project itself is strategically designed to make sure that people who apply know that there's not necessarily a requirement, but if you do want to purchase something, these are the prices.
Mm.
And, you know, without sounding rude, it's like we make it clear we're not going to say this to someone, but we don't say like you have to purchase something in order to be in it, which is why we do an application. And then the application, with the line of questioning on the application and the phone calls that we do, it's evident that we're a business and we rely on revenue to survive. We're not a charity. So it's clear in the phone calls that we do with our, potential applicants. We want to make sure they're comfortable with the pricing before they even step foot into the studio. So, our average client spends about, let's say, $2,000. We're quoting for the specific artwork that we think will fit in their space based on our conversations with them. They might say, "Ooh, wow, that's more than I thought," which is, two-thirds of the people we talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if they say, let's say, for example, they're like, "Oh, I just thought I could be part of the book." Well, you know, yeah, you don't have to purchase anything, of course, but if you're gonna fall in love with the photos, like that's why you reached out. We want you to know what the pricing is. So when you do fall in love with something, if you do fall in love with something, you know what the costs are. And, if that's not something you can afford right now, I totally understand. Like, there's no pressure to buy something that you can't afford, but maybe this isn't the right opportunity for you.
Yeah, and
So
the
we
other
try
side of it
really
is you don't
hard
want to waste
to
their
get
time
to that point.
and then all that stuff, right? To have them come
Yeah,
into
because
your
how bad would
studio.
it be if they're like, yeah, exactly. Don't want to waste their time, but don't want to waste ours. But we go about it strategically to where they know what the pricing is, and if they indicate that they can't afford it, we're not going to just put them in the book
Right.
if we can help it, because then that takes away from someone else that can be in it.
Right. So I know like the book project for you and for many people, it's to work with some kind of organization to raise funds for that organization. I know for you, a big part of it was the local shelter that you started out working for, doing their social media, and you've got a really good relationship with that shelter and stuff. What are some advice things that you could give and share with people that are wanting to do book projects and the things you should be looking for with a partner that you're trying to work with and things that you should stay away from and not, because I know you've given me some advice over the years on that, and there it's pretty solid advice. But what are some things you should be looking for, and then who should you stay away from when it comes to trying to partner with somebody? And let's stick with specifically pets and dogs and stuff like that, because I know there's a wide variety of things that you can do, for other genres and all that stuff. But I know your expertise is on the pet world. So, what would you be looking for in that regards?
Yeah. So with us, as you alluded to, I worked with a shelter that I had a really long-standing relationship with. I've talked to other photographers who's asked for help, other photographers who have asked for help, and they're just picking their local shelter that they've never worked with. They have no relationship with. Um, and I can only speak to the experience that I've had, but I knew my book project was going to be successful because it was going to be my sole focus, and I was going to work on it no matter to make it successful.
Hmm.
If you're like, I'm going to pick the biggest shelter in the area because they have 10,000 or 100,000 followers on Facebook, and you're going to rely on that to be successful, I think you're barking up the wrong tree.
No pun
You need
intended.
to yeah, exactly, Brady. Um, you no, that pun was intended,
Okay,
especially
there you
if
go.
my wife is listening. Um, so yeah, like you have to make sure it's successful with the work you're going to put in. If you're counting on the shelter to share it for you and make it successful, then maybe they'll share it, but don't make a requirement. Like don't lean on them to make it successful. But also, I would say work with them by doing adoption photos because we're focusing on pet specific, like for 6 months to a year before you even float the idea of a book project. Make sure you enjoy working with them, making sure your contact is, trustworthy, or that they're gonna. A lot of these people that work at shelters, like they don't stay there very long.
Hmm.
So you could spend 6 months building a relationship with a staff member there, and they could leave and go find another job, like I did. I left after 2 years. So I think if my piece of advice for like the organizations are make sure your values are aligned. That can mean a number of things, but making sure you like working with them, making sure that they do what they say they're going to do. When I first approached them with this project, I said, here's my wish list of all these marketing touch points that I'd love help with: press release, email to your newsletter, posting on Facebook, a number of other things. And they said, we can't do a press release. We only do press releases for like hard hitting stories regarding the animals because they don't want to abuse their relationship with their local news partners. They wouldn't put it in their email because they reserve they're like really cautious of how often they market, but they were willing to share it on social media, and they would every time I tagged them, they shared it. So that was really helpful. Um, but I think what was really helpful too was that my adoption photo work goes back years with them. And I'm known in this community for doing all these adoption photos. So it just made sense. You might have a harder time if you're starting with a new relationship. You might not. Maybe you'll prove me wrong, but I think I was lucky and fortunate enough to have that relationship built up.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of leads into some of the stuff that you're doing when it comes to you have started this sponsorship program where you're having people sponsor adoption photos and stuff. And I know that was kind of a passion project for you that took a little bit of time for you to build up. And I love the idea before we even talk about the sponsorship type of thing. I love the idea of partnering with other shelters and stuff for doing the adoption photos. What kind of advice could you give? Because I know I've reached out to a couple places like where we got our dog. It's a foster organization, and when I reached out to them about doing a book project, they were all on board. They actually shared it on their social media. They've been, once I got them on board with it, they were really good about it and all that stuff. And I even talked to them about doing adoption photos for those dogs, especially the dogs that were struggling to get adopted and everything. And they were open to it. But what was really interesting is I set up a time and a day each month or each couple of weeks for them to come in and bring in dogs, and it was like crickets. I never got anybody to come in. So what, like, if you're wanting to kind of build that relationship and actually have people do it, I know fosters are a little bit different maybe than, a shelter where all the dogs are in one place, where fosters are, they're in foster homes all over the place. How do you broach that with the shelter? Because time and location. I mean, I've seen your pictures of where you do, because you do a lot of behind the scenes videos of those pictures, and it looks like they give you an ample space to work with and all that stuff. But I know not every shelter is like that. They're overrun with dogs, and so they're using all those or pets, and they're overrun with those pets, and they're using all those spaces for those pets. How do you navigate that conversation, or do you have advice on that? Because you kind of had a ready-made thing, but do you have some advice on somebody that wants to work with shelters or fosters and do those kind of things for them?
Yeah, so a lot of things I can say on this. So if you're wanting to work with a foster or a rescue that doesn't have a facility, those rescues are limited in resources and time, and getting their attention can be hard because they're solely focused on those pets and getting them adopted, and they have usually stricter guidelines to get those dogs adopted.
Hmm.
So what we did on top of our shelter work, which I'll get to, we started doing a day at our studio where any rescue or shelter could pick a spot. So we opened it up to more than just one. So that way our eggs weren't all in one basket. Because if you're relying on let's say the owner of the rescue or the whatever their title is, they're busy. Maybe they forgot. Who knows? Maybe a dog emergency came up. There's so many things that can happen. So we've done one so far, and then we offered 7 spots, and that we had 3 different rescues represented. And then we have one actually coming up this week with 2 rescues represented. So I'm excited about that because we were doing these shelter adoption photos, and so many rescues like, hey, can you help us too? Can you help us too? And I just didn't have the time because we were spending time with private clients and all these other things. And so I said, okay, well, if I can get a sponsor that would basically bring in the same revenue that a private client would bring in, like, why not? I'd love to do that. And it's less time on the phone and less time editing artwork. Why not do that? So we got sponsors to help us with that. And then regarding going to a shelter, I hear a lot of like horror stories of like, I reached out to the shelter and they never got back to me, or I started working with the shelter and they never uploaded my photos. And that can be frustrating. You go there, you spend your time, you do all the editing, and then they never use the photos. So my advice there is most shelters these days use an online platform to manage the shelter. See if they'll give you a username and login to upload the photos yourself, which is what we do. So I can guarantee that the photos are used. And then if you don't have that luxury, I would say usually the person you've reached out to is like a volunteer coordinator. You which is not the same person that's uploading the photos. Usually it's like a
Right.
marketing person.
Right.
So just email them and say, hey, are you the best person to talk to about making sure the photos get uploaded? Is there a marketing associate or director of marketing that, I can send these to directly and, get the middleman out or whatever. So that usually I gave that someone advice and she emailed me back. She was like, oh my gosh, that my photos went up the next day because I emailed the marketing person instead.
Nice.
You got to remember, these people have so many hats that they're wearing. They're doing so much. They're not worried about you and making your business successful. They're trying to get these animals adopted. So if you
No,
can
I
make their
get it.
lives a little easier
No, I get it.
somehow.
Yeah, well,
um
and I think the other side of it too, and you've talked about how busy they are, but especially in the foster organizations, in the foster organizations, most of them they're not taking much of a salary or anything, and most of them are volunteers, and so it's their side hustle type of passion project that they're doing. I shouldn't even say side hustle because that usually incorporates some kind of financial gain to it, but most of them it's a passion project because they want to help a pet community or whatever, and it is their side thing. So working, I would imagine, like in my own experience, working with foster organizations is more difficult than working with like shelters because usually shelters do have some paid staff people that work with them or whatever, but they, like you said, they're lean and mean and they don't have a whole lot of people, and so they're probably wearing five different hats and not getting paid a whole lot. So when Adam or John come around and say, "Hey, we want to help you with this," right? And yeah, it's helping them, but it's also helping promote you. They can see it as a help, but they can also see, we're fine without your photos, maybe, so to speak. I mean, do you see, like, have you gained experience that you can go back to a shelter or something and see that those professionally made photos that you guys do in studio or on location have made that big of a difference to say, hey, that dog wasn't going to get adopted before. It struggled, like it was been in a shelter for 10 weeks and we did this photo and a week later it got adopted.
Yeah, I mean, I have a handful of stories that I know of personally just through interactions on social media. And, I'm able to, get with the new owners. The shelter and I have worked out a way where I can reach out to the shelter, or excuse me, reach out to the adopter and see if, kind of do some, I say, congratulations on adopting Betsy, but how did you see her? Like, what prompted you to adopt her? So I have that relationship with them where they share the adopter's information with me and I can reach out. So that's helpful. Um, so we have been doing this program. It's called the Second Shot program. You know, and we're giving these shelter pets a second shot, and we're keeping track of the numbers. We started in October. So in October of this year, we're going to put out some numbers on the average length of stay, how many dogs and pets we've adopted or photographed, and how many have gotten adopted, and what the shelter's average length of stay was versus once they get their photo. So we're in the process of getting all that data. It'll take some number crunching. But there's this one dog, Betsy, who was there for 75 days. She was deaf, and people were overlooking her. And we posted a video about her behind the scenes from her photo shoot. She got adopted 2 days later. Um, and I have a handful of stories like that, but I'm sure there's more of people that I didn't get a chance to reach out to. Because if you look at the shelter's website, they're half of them, because we go about once a week, have our photo. They just get so many pets in that it's you can't keep up with. There's no way to get our photos on every pet all at the same time.
Yeah, unless you're
Um,
like officing there and then you're like part of the check-in process when they come in.
right. Which is like what I would. Well, at check-in it would be hard. We call it an intake, but that would be hard because that's when they're scared and nervous, and that's when
No,
they're
no, I
like
get it. But
intake
like the
photo.
point being is just like when you're there and when it's the right time in the process, you're able to just take their photo kind of as part of the
Yeah.
whole process where you're coming in once a month or something like that. Some dogs get adopted right away, but they didn't need that photo, obviously, if they got adopted right away. So,
Right. Well, the other thing too is like I was like, man, I just love doing these adoption photos so much. How can I do it more? So that's when the idea for the sponsorships came about. Because I said, well, I have to make money somehow to feed my family without
right,
sounding too dramatic. So I was like,
right.
well, I listen to YouTube video or I watch YouTube videos, I listen to podcasts all the time. These podcasts and YouTube videos are sponsored constantly. There's always sponsorships in the middle of these podcasts and YouTube videos. I was like, why can't I do that? So that's how I got the idea. I was like, okay, if I can offset my costs and just get paid to go to the shelter, why not? So that's what I did.
So what kind of people are sponsoring that, and are you putting that sponsorship back on the shelter itself or the organization, or are you going out and finding those sponsors for them and all that? How is kind of give us an overhead a high level view of what that looks like for the sponsorship program.
Yeah. So when I first came up with it, I was like, oh man, I'm going to create a packet on why we're doing this, like a PDF or a slide deck, like as if I was like pitching an investor or
Right.
something, Um, so I put together a packet of, what we're doing, some before and after pictures of the intake photo versus our photo, and then some of the success stories, our metrics on social media, like our follower count, et cetera, and then some pricing. I basically calculated what it would cost for me to spend time at the shelter and the editing, and I came up with a price. And then I posted it on Facebook and I said, hey, we're looking for sponsors to be able to do this more. And then slowly businesses reached out. It slowed down quite a bit, to be honest. And it's a lot of work to try and find sponsors, constant networking and emailing. Um, if I stop emailing, then the sponsorships don't come in. Um, so some of the businesses are like totally random. Like one was a lawyer, one was a assisted living facility, one what Westcott, which is not random. I actually emailed them. Westcott's the lighting company that we
Mhm.
use. Um, who else? Oh, Forever Lawn of Tampa Bay. Shout out to them. They've sponsored for a year, so they've paid once a month. They've signed on for a year, which is amazing. They're the one that makes the most sense, I think, because they sell like synthetic grass, and they have a vested interest in getting clients who have dogs
Right.
to sell, their synthetic grass too. So they've been awesome. Um, yeah, so it's just like completely random. And I thought that they would be in love with the marketing aspect, right? Like, oh, he has all these followers, which really isn't that many in comparison. And they're gonna get all this, marketing lift. And it wasn't about that for them. It was just about the feel good and helping support me. And
That's cool.
so, I thought that they would be interested in this like marketing jargon, but they didn't care. It was really about just doing something good.
Well, then you had something really, really cool happen a couple of months ago that it made national news. Like you guys got national recognition. Tell me, like, how did that all transpire, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so we were on World News Tonight with David Muir, which was like incredible. I watched that. I don't watch the news that much anymore, but a couple years ago I was watching it every day, so I was very familiar with them. My mom watches it every day, so she cried when she heard that we were going
My
to be on it.
baby's on here.
Um, yeah. So, and what's funny too is that I was kind of bearish on or like not so gung ho on TikTok because I didn't like see the value in it because it was a worldwide audience and I was trying to use it to like get clients,
Mm,
which I don't know if you have, John, if you have experience with TikTok, but it was just in my head a younger audience and I wasn't attracting people in Tampa. So I was
yeah.
like, I'm not going to use this. This is a waste of time.
Yeah, I'm
So
with
then when
you.
I
I,
realized
I
I
I
could use it,
try and get into TikTok, but it's like, hey, I'm gonna do TikTok a couple of times, and then I like don't do it, and then but my kids are like, you got to do TikTok, Dad, and I'm like, but I'm not attracting 18-year-olds. But there's a lot more
right,
people that are on there that are not 18. It's a lot of like
right,
I do senior photography, and one of the things that they keep telling me, it's not about just the kids that are on TikTok, but the mamas are on TikTok too. And my wife swipes through TikTok all day long too. And so if you're posting and sharing dogs or seniors or whatever you're doing, then people are going to see it. But I get it. I'm the same way. I've been a, I don't know about TikTok yet, but I still have some content. It's just not very often.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, I felt the same way, and then I was like, why don't I just post like I was doing a lot on Instagram, post something similar on TikTok, Instagram, and then one of the producers reached out and saw one of our videos that had gone viral of a dog named drawing a blank now. I have to look. One of the dogs before and after had like a crazy head tilt in the video, and it explained like in the caption like what we do and how we take photos of shelter pets. And yeah, the producer reached out, and it took like 3 weeks from when they reached out to when we were actually on. And I was like, oh my gosh, when are they going to reach out? When don't seem too eager. What don't email them back? Like they'll reach out. And then they did, and they said, hey, it's going to be on today. Can you reach out to the adopter and get them to send you a video by 5 o'clock? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So, but I did, and they did, and it turned out great. And what's even funnier, My dogs, I have two. They hate seeing dogs on TV. Hate it. They'll bark at the TV.
That's funny.
So
So dog
so
TV or
so
whatever it is not their thing.
no, no. So we pulled it up on the TV because I knew it was going to be on, and it was like it's at the end of the segment, end of the, it's like locally it's here from 6:30 to 7. So at like 6:58 it was on. And then my dogs started barking their faces off because they saw me with these other dogs on the big screen, and they were trying to like protect me or whatever, which they tend to want to do. And then I couldn't hear it at all. I couldn't hear what he was saying because they were barking so loud. So luckily we recorded it, and I had to watch it when they went to sleep. But there's this little funny thing that happened.
No,
But
that's
yeah,
fun.
they just saw it on TikTok.
So did that kind of help with kind of getting the word out about what you're doing with the sponsorship? Because I know a lot of that was wrapped into what you're doing with the shelter animals and helping them get adopted and stuff. Did stuff like that kind of help with that?
You would think so. No, it didn't.
Okay.
I do lean on it after the fact, where if I'm pitching a new sponsor, I'll link to that video. Um, but in the moment, we got calls because it aired East Coast and West Coast. We got calls from all over the country just saying like, and form fills on our website just saying, I'm not interested in a photo shoot, but I just wanted to call and say, you're doing God's work, basically.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was kind of fun to get calls like that. Um, but no, not directly. I've gotten that question a few times, and it's not like I got swarmed with, photo shoot requests. It was
Well,
more
and I asked
just
that I asked that question because I think there's a an idea behind a lot of photographers and just people in business in general. Like when you get, oh, I get positive national media stuff, it'll bring me business, and that's not always necessarily the case. I asked it kind of with knowing kind of where it was probably going because I've seen people that have had the same kind of thing. I did a thing with Peter Hurley and they did 10,000 headshots and stuff like that during the pandemic and everything, and we got some media exposure. It was local, and he got national exposure and stuff like that, but um, yeah, I don't know if it was the thing that propelled it to everybody went and that was jobless or whatever went and got headshots. But I think that's the motive behind that is just like, we focus on different marketing aspects in our business. And I think we have to have a variety of marketing within our business. Media is a great thing when you can get it, but it's not going to, if you get on TV, they will come, type of thing, and you're
right,
on national media and it just like people aren't banging down your door and your schedule is now booked for a year. I think that's kind of
right,
the thing behind that is just like, it's not a negative to you or anything. It's just, it's a positive in the sense of knowing that, hey, don't think that media is just going to make your business awesome, you know?
right. Well, one thing that did happen was the video, because they put it on Facebook also. That went viral as well, and got a lot of messages from photographers that said I inspired them to do something in their city from all over the world, which was incredible, like Sri Lanka and Italy and Ukraine. That was really neat to see that. So money aside, just that inspiring people to do adoption photos at their shelter, that's a win for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you can, if you can inspire somebody doing that kind of thing, that's pretty cool as well. Are you helping people with like that might want to go into doing some of that sponsorship stuff? Because I know, like, part of what you do with your business is, working with other photographers who are wanting to build their business in the way of pet photography in some way, shape, or form. Is that something that you help and kind of guide people with?
Yeah. So I have a few courses on our website. One is like pet photography in general. The other one is adoptable pet photography, and there is a section in there that covers sponsorships. But to be honest, it sounds difficult, and maybe it's not really that difficult. I'll give you three sentences on how to do it. Post on Facebook, do some adoption photos. Post on Facebook that you want to do more adoption photos. Say, I need sponsors. It costs this. See if people reach out. If they don't reach out, create a packet with some, slides on why you're doing what you're doing with some costs. Send it to local businesses who might think you either know, maybe you have clients that own businesses, start there and just reach out. I mean, it seems difficult, but it's really not.
Right.
It's To me, it's simple, but
Yeah,
maybe I'm
I mean, well, like
oversimplifying it. But
you can probably agree with this that when you're doing things in business, sometimes we make a bigger thing out of it than it actually is once you actually start seeing some success. I think like a starting out
hmm
photographer thinks that it's way harder, way bigger, and way more difficult. Now, I'm not saying business is easy. I'm not sugarcoating it and saying, "Oh, this is easy," but there's some aspects of it. It's just like, hey, if you just got to put in the work and the time and the effort, like the posting on social media. Some people go, I hate posting on social media. Well, that's part of it. It's like you got to do that kind of
yeah.
thing to get
Well,
the recognition.
I think, and this is not like a negative towards photographers that have reached out. I think it's, if anything, I've been able to leverage it with my courses, to be fair, because I would get a lot of people reaching out and I would just ignore them because it was just, I would get inundated with requests. So then I just like, you know what, let me just create a course. I know you're using Venus from Profit First.
Mhm.
Venus, if we can talk,
Oh, and totally, yeah. Like we could
tout
talk a little
her.
bit about that because I'm gonna have Venus on here someday too. So we could, yeah, we
Yeah,
could talk
awesome.
about that
So
next.
essentially, yeah, yeah. So essentially, Venus is someone who specializes in profit first. She didn't create it. There's a book by a gentleman named Mike McCallowitz, I
Yeah,
think
I
is how
always
you
screw up
pronounce
the
it.
name too. he,
Uh,
he jokes that he
um,
screws up his own name. So
so I've been working with her, but she's essentially a bookkeeper and helps, businesses like ours pay themselves first and look into profit first. I'm not going to go into all of it now, but if you're interested in a different way of bookkeeping, look into profit first. And anyway, so she suggested selling my knowledge, which I do have a lot of. So what I'm getting at is a lot of photographers that I've come across can be lazy. They want a quick answer. When I like spent a lot of time figuring all this out, I spent years figuring all this out. I'm like, why am I going to give you the answer when I spent so much time figuring it out? And then a light bulb went off with Venus's help, and she's like, well, why don't you just charge them to for your knowledge? So then I created these courses, and then I can direct people to the courses to get some of the information that they may not have or want. I didn't have that to me. Like I had to learn all this myself for
right,
the most part.
right.
So,
Yeah, and if
um,
you're listening to this podcast like I feel like sometimes photographers feel offended when you're like, well, I mean, I got a course or you can pay me to get that information or that help or whatever. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's not a slight to you. It's not that I don't want to see people succeed. I want everybody that wants to do photography and get serious with it succeed. But like you said, I worked a lot. I learned a lot. I paid a lot of money to get to where I need to go, like whether it be with business coaching or courses or learning it on my own. It's that's a valuable thing, kind of like our photography. If you want people to take you seriously in photography, and pay what you believe that you're worth and all that stuff, then you have to respect that in your own right. You should respect it in somebody else's right when they have their own quote unquote intellectual property that you want them to just give you, you know.
yeah. Well, what's funny about that is when I first started, this was 2016. There was a guy in Austin doing something similar to what I wanted to do in pet photography. There was a lot less pet photographers back then. And I reached out. I was like, "Hey, man, like, I love what you're doing. Like, can I pick your brain a little bit?" And he's like, "I can help you, but it'll cost you 300 an hour." And I was like, "You SOB. I was just trying to help these shelter pets, and you want to charge me?" But then I get it now. I totally get it. But at the time, it fueled me to do it myself. And so, although I didn't pay him, didn't talk to him again, I always use that as fuel to, figure it out on my own. But that's just me, that how I'm built. I'm gonna make something successful if I put my mind to it.
So I know you like just said let's breeze through this really quick, but since I got you and we got a few more minutes here, if you got a couple of minutes of extra time here, but I know you talked about profit first. Both you and I are working with Venus, and again, I don't want to get like crazy into the weeds, but I don't know about you. I'm sure you could say the same thing. Working with Venus has transformed my business and my personal finances and everything. But to give a quick overview, if you've not read the book, I would recommend you go and read Mike's book, Profit First. There's other books coming out, and Venus is writing one specifically for photographers with Mike's permission. And it's called Profit First for Photographers, I believe, is when it comes out. It's coming out here in the next few months. I actually met with her earlier today, and we were talking just as briefly about it. But But what profit first is focusing on just that profit first, paying yourself, profit in your business and all that stuff. And then everything else is kind of secondary. I know you haven't been working with Venus incredibly long. You started about a year ago, maybe or so.
About a year and a half,
Okay,
February
year
of
and a half. I
23.
I started working with Venus. Officially, we started in January, but like we were doing some stuff in December. I just wanted a nice clean break at the first of the year. But tell me how working with Venus has kind of transformed your business and, in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I hate numbers. I have a bookkeeper and my same who was doing my taxes too, and I always just thought that they would give me this advice. Like they would look at my books and be like, "Hey, you're a little shy this month," or "Hey, you should consider lowering your expenses." And I never got any of that advice from them. And then that's not what they promised. That's not their job. And they never told me they would give me that. But when I learned about Profit First, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense to how I process numbers." And seeing all my money in different accounts just makes it so clear. You create these different buckets with percentages of your income and you pay yourself a profit first and then you take a profit once a quarter. It's just great for how I run. But we were fortunate enough 2 years ago to have like a few big commercial jobs. I think it was about 80,000 in those commercial jobs. And then I was like, oh, great, I can hire all these people. My life's going to be easier. Um, and then we didn't get those commercial jobs again. And I paid that person, a studio manager, like a salary. So she was making money, even though we weren't making money. I just couldn't afford to pay her anymore. And Profit First kind of opened my eyes to that because, and Venus, because she was like, hey, your salary is like 60% of your expenses. Like that shouldn't be the case. You need to figure out how to lower your expenses. And she said, well, if you let this person go, are you going to be able to manage all these activities with just you and your wife? And figured that out. But it was just that conversation alone was worth its weight in gold. Venus is not inexpensive, I mean, but it's worth every penny for the advice and the mentorship that she's given me. But the biggest thing is selling my knowledge, which is those courses, because it was like I had all this, if you think about it, like all this money sitting up in my head that was going to waste. So I have done workshops. I have one coming up in June, depending on when this comes out. And now it's just, she calls it, I think, mailbox money. I don't know if she's ever said that to you,
Hmm.
but you can just make money while you sleep, essentially, if you put your, this is not, unique to Venus, but courses are ubiquitous, they're everywhere. You can make some money, um, by selling your knowledge. So by that revenue, she's helped me. We also have done, we have a large contract with a veterinary chain to do artwork for their hospital. So that's bringing in revenue, these sponsorships, and then portrait work. So that's four buckets of revenue versus one before. So if it was a slow month in portrait work and that was our only piece of revenue, I was stressed out, man. I was like, it was not fun to be around when that was happening.
No, I get it. I
Um,
totally get it. Well, and
yeah.
I would say too, when it comes to the profit first, I was just sharing this right before we got on here, and Venus and I kind of half jokingly about it, but I was kicking myself when it was all said and done. But 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to the day when her and I were chatting about this over Zoom, I had reached out to her because I read the book 2 years ago, like a little over 2 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, this, like you, this makes sense. This is what I have to do in my business to really succeed and do the right things and everything. And I didn't. And I actually scheduled a time with her and my accountant bookkeeper at the time. I was telling them I wanted to do something like this, and they talked me out of it because they didn't understand it. And even Mike talks about that. Like a lot of accountants don't even understand it, and they think it's like silly and foolishness and all that stuff. And it's all about your P&L and your balance sheet at the end of the day. That's all that matters. And most people that are in photography business don't even know how to read that stuff. And so, but I canceled the appointment with Venus. And I went on 2 years, and not that, like, obviously we've done pretty good in our business, but man, we could have been way more profitable if we would have stuck with business. And I would have probably made decisions different. Like you can understand this too, like having that studio manager there go, can I afford this person? But when you do it in profit first, as you probably can attest, you really see, can I afford this or can I afford it? Because if I'm allocating 20% or whatever to salaries and and I'm spending 30% every month, something's got to change, you know? I mean, it's very eye-opening. It sees where you're bleeding right away and you make those adjustments. And like I was telling you before I got on here, my profit from the this time last year, because I just checked it the other day, this time last year to this year is 163% in the positive. And that's a huge change. And all I did was started with profit first, you know? So yeah, we're giving Venus a plug here because she is amazing. She works specifically with photographers and she does it all over the country. I think it's really funny, by the way. Right after I started working with Venus, she does a quarterly magazine. I got the quarterly magazine in the mail, and your picture was on the front cover. And I was like, hey, I know this guy. And then the next quarter, the picture on the front was Colt, who is a photographer here in Katy as well, like right now, you know, in my same area. So I was just like, and it kind of spurred me to reach out to him and just say, hey, Colt, I'm in your area. I've known you for years. I've known of you for years, but I've been afraid to say something because we're quote unquote competition. We just haven't had the time, but it's, but I've been able to make relations with other people because of Venus and Profit First.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was one other thing I was going to mention too. Oh, when I first talked with Venus, she was like, "Well, what are your goals?" And I said, "I'd love to be able to afford to take December off
Mm.
next year." So basically, we have a separate account that just pulls money from operating and drips it into that account and even forget about it. So by the end of the year, I'll have enough money
Enough
to
to get you
take
through
December
December and
off.
not have to think about it.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah.
right. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm not even thinking about it. It just gets pulled out and it's, a couple hundred a week, but
Yep.
it's going to add up and then I could take all of December off.
Yeah, like I said, Profit First is a whole podcast on its own, and it is so worth it because we don't talk about that side of business enough when it comes to what we do. But I'll definitely be
Yeah.
bringing Venus on at some point, and we'll be talking more of those kind of things because you know it is pricey, but she was actually cheaper than my previous bookkeeper. And
Mm,
at the end of the day, and I'm getting way more out of it. Like, you know, I had the same thought as you. Like, you know, your bookkeeper, your accountant, or whatever is supposed to tell you how to, you know, stop spending money here, stop doing this, stop doing that. And when that doesn't happen, you know, you just think you're doing everything right, even though you're probably not doing everything right. And Venus isn't ever a jerk about it, but she's like, hey, maybe you should rethink about this. Or the other day I said, I have a dream. I want to go on a trip to Europe. Okay, well, let's start saving for that trip to Europe. I'm like, I got some other goals right now. Nope, let's start 1%. That's all you're going to put in there for now. I'm like, that's not a whole lot, but you're starting, you know? And so having
mhm.
that encouragement and her telling me that, hey, now is the time to start looking at that kind of thing is a good thing. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
Adam, man, it's been awesome having you on here. I appreciate you so much for giving me the time. And I know we've tried to do this a couple of times together and everything, but I'm glad we got to finally connect and everything. So tell us if somebody wants to connect with you or learn more about like some of that education stuff that you're doing, where could they find you? We're going to put this in the show notes, but where could they find you and how could they connect and learn some of the things that you're doing in your business?
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity, of course, thanks for having me. I'm glad we're able to do it finally.
Yeah.
You can learn all about our educational content on our website, which is agoldphoto.com. And if you check out our Instagram, agoldphoto, we post a wealth of behind the scenes photos and videos there so you can get a sense of our setup and the gear we use. But yeah, agoldphoto.com is the best place to find us.
Awesome. And like I said, I'll put that in the show notes. Definitely go check out what Adam is doing. Follow him on social media. He's always doing behind the scenes video. Like you're talking about inspiring other people. Your behind the scenes photos or videos and stuff inspire me. I need to do that more. And I keep saying that every time I see yours and I still don't do it. But you're the one motivating me to eventually get more into that.
Glad I could help.
There you go. But again, Adam, thanks so much. I know we started off like, I mean, we had a couple of times where we were trying to get this together and we had to reschedule. And then today I had a crazy downpour of rain and I was hoping I would keep power. And hey, here we got it finally done. So thanks again for allowing me some time to get to talk to you and learn about your business and everything. It was truly a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it as well.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Cool, cool.
All right, I just have to text my wife because she's saying, "Who's picking up Benjamin?"